Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. The cracks within the opposition, are they manifesting themselves? Are we looking at a divided opposition? We'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about the slot of the Chairman's Senate as another meeting was held on that. There doesn't seem to be any agreement on any name yet. Will the opposition be able to reach such an agreement? We'll be talking about that. The normal war of words that is going on between political parties that will perhaps prevent even the opposition from having a joint agenda towards their goal. Let's talk about all of that. I have with me Javed Siddique Saab, who's a senior journalist. Thank you for being with us. Barrister Safiullah Ghori, who's a legal expert. Thank you for joining us today. And Javed Jadoon Saab, who's a senior analyst. Thank you for being with us. Javed Saab, as far as the situation is, the way the situation is unfolding, we've seen the opposition having meetings back and forth. They've been meeting, they've been trying to come to a joint agenda as far as they say they have a joint agenda. But don't you think there are cracks within that? There's no agreement on a name. Okay, they're going to have meetings again. Of course, it's still early as far as that is concerned. But do you think it's an achievable goal at this point in time?
I think it seems to be unachievable for the reason that there are diverse parties with diverse views and diverse interests.
Right.
So it is always difficult to agree to a certain point in such a situation. We have seen in the past as well when the alliances were created,
right,
and they agreed to do something against the sitting government. They had to chalk out an agenda, but they failed to do it. So I think again the opposition is trying to dislodge the Chairman Senate as they have announced. Previously, before that, they were saying that they will not allow this federal budget to be passed. And they had vowed to the people that they will put force
right,
again against the government efforts to get it passed, but
right,
they failed. So I think it is easier said than done, and it is not easy for them to remove the Chairman's Senate.
Because of the division within
I think the
opposition.
second important thing is that they will not be able to agree to field a joint candidate.
Right.
So that's very important because the PPP and the PMLN both, they claim that they want their own person to be the chairman of the Senate.
And that itself, is enough for the government. I don't think they have much to worry about.
So the government will try to cash in on this difference between the two major parties. The other smaller parties are obviously not interested in dislodging this chairman who is from a minority province.
Right.
So therefore I think it seems to be an unachievable task for the opposition parties at the moment.
Right. Safiullah, do you agree? Do you think that it seems as difficult as Javed Siddique Saab is saying?
Maruf, I have a slightly different perspective on the matter. So if we look at the statistics, we have 104 seats in the Senate. Right. And you need only a 1/4 number of people to lodge the motion, right, and then a simple majority to continue.
Right.
Now the opposition has 65 seats. PTI along with its allies has 38 seats. But we just need to sort of step back and look at the history of this person, and I'll agree with Javed Saab, what he stated a little while ago, that historically we have seen that when the elections for Chairman Senate were to take place, there were two people in the field, Sadiq Sanjarani, who is the present Chairman Senate, and Raja Zafar Haq of PML Nawaz. And it was People's Party who put their weight behind Sadiq Sanjarani and got him elected as Chairman Senate.
Right.
So now obviously they could withdraw their support and get him dislodged from this position, but we have to keep in mind yet another problem. There's a lacuna in all of this. The problem is that the voting for Chairman Senate, and if you have to remove the Chairman Senate, constitutionally under Article 53 of the Constitution,
right,
it is a secret ballot. And in a secret ballot, you don't really know. The government cannot exercise its influence over its senators. We don't know who's going to vote which way.
But it's possible even the opposition
absolutely.
may lose its,
anything is possible in a secret ballot.
Right.
But then we have two things that come into play here. The first thing is the fact that a lot of opposition senators are no longer attending the Senate. For instance, Ishaq Dar, many other people who have cases opened up against them, right, and they're simply not going, and they won't be able to put their weight behind the Senate votes. And then the second issue is that, which we've heard recently, for instance, we heard recently that a host of MPAs visited Prime Minister Imran Khan, and in a secret ballot, it is entirely possible that the opposition might even vote in favor of the government and lose it. So the question really comes down to
something that they seem to be afraid of.
absolutely. The question really now is, can they take that risk? Because this is their last stand. This is the only thing they have left.
Right.
Politically speaking, they have failed, just like Javed Saab said a while ago. They were unable to stop the finance bill from passing. They've been unable to stop any other act, any other action by the present government from happening. There's an onslaught of NAB on them. This is quite literally their last demonstration of strength. If they fail at this, they will lose absolutely all face with the people.
Right. But why not, let me go to Javed Jadoon Saab. Jadoon Saab, why not amass, they keep talking about the PTI, they keep talking about the fact that, you know, they held rallies against them, the famous jalsas of PTI at the time that it was, you know, it hadn't formed government. Why don't they do that? Do you think that the opposition together at this time cannot get enough people together to show, you know, to show a show of strength to the government? Are they afraid that they will not be able to get the kind of numbers that they want?
Thank you, Maru. I think first of all, we need to understand why this move is being made by the combined opposition against the government, PTI-led government. I think the basic objective is to put pressure on the government as far as the cases are concerned against the top leadership of the two political parties, PPP and PMLN. Secondly, you pointed out an important factor, that are they able to put together a reasonable crowd or reasonable people or workers or followers to put actual pressure on the government? I think this is not going to happen. First of all, because this is not a very popular move on their part. They are unable to sell this idea of destabilizing the government to the people of Pakistan. Because
even at this time in, you know, where we've had the budget,
yes,
where we are with the devaluation of the rupee, we are where we are with inflation, even at this time, the opposition cannot, probably, in your opinion, get enough people together to show strength.
If you look at the composition of the rebel committee which met today, I think the leading lights are the unelected people. They are not even represented in the parliament of Pakistan.
Right.
So I fail to understand how could they sort of make a move to dislodge the sitting chairman of Senate while they are not part of the two houses of the parliament, not part of the Senate itself. I think this is the kind of dichotomy they are facing right now.
Do you think part of it is because we've seen a lot of, you know, we've seen the movement of accountability going on. We've seen the way a lot of the PMLN leaders, for example, you know, the first tier leadership, the second tier leadership are in jail at this point. So perhaps, you know, the kind of people needed, and, you know, Rana Sanaullah just a few days ago, day before yesterday. So leaders like this who are very important to the composition of the party, to get crowds together, to get the movement, you know, Saad Rafiq and his brother, all of, do you think part of it is that, of course, the you know, former Prime Minister himself being in jail, a kind of, maybe a rift within PMLN?
Of
do you
course.
think a lot of that is responsible?
I think, Mark, you're right. First of all, there's definitely a very visible rift within Pakistan Muslim League, and even there are fissures in Pakistan People's Party as well. And secondly, we have seen that after the arrest of the Punjab President Rana Sanaullah, nobody came on the road to protest against his arrest by the ANF. And I think this is not going well with the opposition, because
nobody came on the roads
they were expecting that people would come out.
Yes.
People not coming out on the streets, and the reason number one is that even PML itself is divided house. It has been divided by the family itself, not by anyone else. Mr. Shahbaz Sharif has a different narrative, and Mariam Nawaz has a very different narrative. And these narratives are in fact not coexisting at the moment. Mr. Shahbaz Sharif basically would like to pursue a path which is a moderate path, and understanding, because he's a seasoned politician, he does understand.
The fact that he wants to, I'm going to go to Javed Sadiq Saab. Sadiq Saab, do you think, of course, he wants a more moderate path, which I agree with Javed Jadoon Saab. He's clearly has a different approach towards political, you know, even retaliating politically, and he wants it to be, you know, not as aggressive as Mariam Nawaz does. But Do you think part of that is the reason why there isn't a movement against Rana Sanaullah's arrest? Because he doesn't encourage it, he doesn't want there to be that kind of, that kind of politics?
Look, if we look at the history of Muslim League itself,
Right.
it has never been a party of street agitation. They have never been able to launch a massive street agitation against any government in the past. And given the kind of leadership they have, given the kind of workers or the party workers they have, actually they do not come on streets to protest. They believe in drawing room politics, maneuvers to get into power.
But Javed sir, if
deals
somebody brings them on the roads,
yeah,
they'll
and
come on the
that
road.
is precisely the reason. There were some.
Maybe if Mariam Nawaz were to be allowed to
but
bring them on the roads, if she's
even
the kind
she
of
has not
aggression
been-
that we are seeing.
But even she has not been able to pull big crowds, and the kind of situation
But do you
that
think
they are
it's because she
facing.
doesn't want to perhaps encourage the impression of the rift?
That could be a reason, but at the same time, I think they don't want to go to that length
Right.
where
They can't come back.
Exactly. So therefore, they are very cautious
So
and
they're
careful.
unsure at this point.
Exactly.
And
They
so
are
they're
extremely-
neither here nor there. And
Exactly. They are extremely vulnerable at the moment because they are facing references in the courts.
And of course, her father
And
being in jail. that
father
itself.
being in jail, former prime minister. More investigations have been launched against him.
And she's
And
on
there are
record
s-
saying that every time that I make these statements and I'm aggressive, things are tightened around my father. I don't
This is
get
what
to
they are
see him.
saying. I
Right.
mean, one of the reasons that they're saying that the news is being tightened against the PMLN top leadership is
Right.
that I become aggressive and I make statements which are offensive to certain circles. So, but I think there are many factors, multifaceted.
And for a while, she was completely silent. I don't think that had the kind of effect they were probably expecting.
Exactly, and only those people and the movements which were actually launched in Pakistan in the past, political movements which remained effective, they were able to mobilize people on the roads, and they were able to put tremendous pressure on the sitting government
Right.
and to dislodge them finally. They were the people who had, there were no charges against them of corruption, of misdeeds, and sort of misdoings that they were involved in. So this time, the position of the PMLN leadership and the PPP leadership is very vulnerable, very weak, and probably they are morally at such
So you think
a
this is the
lower
best
echelon.
kind of opposition that we're probably going to be seeing for the next 4.5 years?
I think the opposition will not be able to muster the support of the common people, but I think the best way for these two political parties is to subject themselves to introspection first as to what
and
is
come
wrong.
to some kind of common ground.
Exactly, and
Right.
what is wrong with their parties? I mean, they need to democratize their party. They need to put an end to this family rule and the family dynastic rule that they have been witnessing.
Doesn't
and
seem to be happening,
it's not
very
happening.
soon
It is
in the
not going to
future.
happen. But I think finally the party workers will realize that these leaderships are not going to take them too far, and probably they will not be able to achieve their objectives unless they change their leadership and
Ji, sir,
they
feel like
change
it.
their ways.
Do you agree?
Right. So, Maruf, I've just been listening on the conversation, and I have a slightly different perspective once again.
Mhm.
I think it's a standard play of what you call good cop, bad cop, and
You
so
don't think there's a rift?
I genuinely do not believe that there's a rift, and there cannot be a rift because they're both in the same boat. Shehbaz Sharif has cases against him. He's not in jail right now, but he has several cases that he's being investigated for. His son is actually in jail right now.
Right.
There are other relatives. His wives are being investigated. Everybody around, the news that we speak of, this hypothetical news is tightening around every single person. So obviously they all sit down and they discuss what to do. Now when you have this kind of a discussion, if you are a politician, the normal answer that you would reach is that one of us should go out and be aggressive, the other person should try the carrot and stick method. And so by doing so, one would appear to be more reasonable, the other would appear to be more rash. The Pakistanis, one would appeal to the emotional side, the other would appeal to the logical side, and that is how they would want to try and maneuver around their issues. But the
But
fact
don't you
remains,
think they're losing out on this kind of a divided approach, which is what they've been doing from the very beginning?
like you said a little while ago, they tried staying on the same ground when Mariam was quiet. That did not work out. So now they have decided to split their paths and try different approaches. I don't think anything can work, because the central problem that they cannot address is the fact that there are laws in Pakistan. They have violated those laws. There is considerable evidence. The Supreme Court has already convicted them. Their top leadership is convicted. The rest are going to follow suit from the looks of it.
Right.
And so they need to be strengthening. The only area of concentration for them is their legal wing. And I'm afraid that's where they're losing out the most. So they can go ahead, they can try and say that they are being victimized. They can try and say that they are being victimized by NAB. They can try and say that
You're
they are being
saying the
victimized
power
by
of
the
the
courts.
people at this time cannot help them.
There is no power of the people because they never really had it, and that's been the central thesis of many political parties
So
within
that's what
Pakistan
they're
to
saying
begin
about
with.
this government.
Yes, and so that very well could be true. The fact that we have elections in which at least we know for a fact that a minority of Pakistani people vote. It has never been the majority of Pakistan that has come out and voted. So we have always had a minority that has controlled governments, and that is a big problem with Pakistan's democracy. We are not we're an infant, nascent
Right.
democracy. We have democratic problems, and we are stepping towards it. We are getting better step by step. But the fact remains that every single government that has come into Pakistan has, by some standards at least, been undemocratic. And so the will of the people, as far as PM Nawaz is concerned, was never there when he was first brought in, when People's Party was first brought in Ayub Khan's government.
But the kind of flawed democracy, and I think this is the term we generally use for the kind of democracy we have in Pakistan, is it is the system that we have, and according
Yes,
to that system, we elect our leaders, and we have been electing, successive governments. That is what we need to follow.
Absolutely. So that's exactly what I just stated, that we do have an infant democracy that is growing up, and we of course need to continue following it. But the fact remains that the will of the people was not behind these initial governments. Now, perhaps with
Perhaps if
PTI
this
coming
government
forward,
could, if the opposition, comprising of two main political parties, along with Maulana Fazlur Rahman and others, could get enough people together, which they blame, there's a lot of criticism on PTI saying that they amassed people and they put pressure on the government. And while they were in government, if they could do that, if they could show that kind of power to this government, do you think it would have an impact?
of course, Maruk, people have an impact everywhere in the world. That goes without saying. That if they were able to bring people out on the streets, and now would be the perfect time, as you've rightly pointed out, when people are being subjected to crushing inflation, devaluation. Every single person that I personally know of is experiencing the hit. And so anybody could rally behind them. But the problem is that being anti-PTI or being anti-inflation does not automatically mean that you're pro-PML Nawaz or pro-People's Party. This has always been the fallacy. And they have been unable to give you a better option as well. They have been unable to give you alternatives. If they were against the finance bill, could they come up with a better bill? Could they come up with suggestions as to what could be improved? It's a lack of an alternative.
Also, I'm going to go to Javed Jadoon Sahab. Jadoon Sahab, do you think they're afraid also that if they do go down that road, then it might be a threat to democracy itself, and perhaps they will not be able to achieve anything, even if they do manage to get as many people as would prove a power show sort of thing?
Maruk, I don't agree with the notion that there is a groundswell of support for the opposition parties first. And I don't agree with the notion that there is anti-PTI feelings among the people of Pakistan.
Right.
I think people are, because of the traditional media, electronic media and the social media, so well aware what has happened in Pakistan in the last 3 decades, and particularly in the last 10 years. Who doesn't know that whatever we find ourselves today in is because of the policies of the two successive governments in the last 10 years? I think the people of Pakistan are not fools. They are not going to come to support the two political parties who are only trying to save their own dynasties. They're only trying to save their own leadership. They're not representing the causes of the people of Pakistan. They're not representing the aspirations of the people of Pakistan. I think as a student of politics, I can understand that nowhere in the world any political movement succeeded unless it represented the aspiration of the people of that particular country. In Pakistani context, today everybody knows that inflation is rising. Nobody is in this illusion that this is going to come down to single digit in a couple of months' time. currency is depreciating. We had to go to
Do you think
IMF.
maybe in
We had
another,
no other
another
option.
6 months, if the situation does not change as far as inflation is concerned, as far as, of course, one hopes that it does, and you know, according to the Prime Minister, we are on the first step of going towards economic prosperity. Do you think that they will
Maaruf,
have
I
some
think it's a
ground?
$1 million question. Unless the people of Pakistan, the real and the genuine stakeholder of this country, realize one day that they need to go for a change in government, I think then nobody can stop them, and there's no reason that any political party, for whatever reason, could stop the people of
Do you
Pakistan
think that
coming
that
on the streets.
there's been a lot of talk about the dollar, you know, being kept at a low artificially? Do you think that as a Pakistani citizen, it matters to you or me personally whether it was kept low artificially or not for the last 5 years, as long as, you know, it's kept at that same you know, at that same price at this point also? Do you
Maaruf,
think
I think-
considerations like this would
I think
matter?
many eminent economists also agree that it was kept artificially low, and it really hurt the economy. Your exports have gone down, and your imports are definitely the current account deficit is rising. And in the last, I think 5-6 months, it has been brought down about $4 or $5 billion. I think could be many factors, but I think one factor is when you have lesser imports and you sort of finance the exports, you can reduce the current account deficit. And as far as the value of
think
the
that the
currency is
people care
concerned,
about that.
value of the currency, it definitely hurts the people. There's no two
But does
opinion
it not
about
hurt
that.
the people when it continues to climb up?
I think definitely it will have impact in the longer run, and the government, I think we have seen it in the last 2 or 3 days. The value of rupee has appreciated. It reached 164, and today I think it has been trading around 157, 158, something like that. I think one can believe what government says, that
Things are-
market dynamics are operating. So if it goes up, it comes down as well. I think this is a silver lining, and but you need to keep your fingers crossed. And but if things get a bit more difficult for the people, I think then you can see some kind of
So people may move out, people may retaliate,
Only-
but it will only be
only
because
because
of their own.
when they feel the heat.
Exactly. I think in so many countries of the world, many changes or regime change or changes in the government have taken place because of the economic woes of the people. And the same situation is brewing up in Pakistan. But I think people at large, they understand the reasons. The primary reason for the current economic crisis is the policies of the previous governments. The way they were running the government.
Javed sir, by that same nexus, then you think the people will be satisfied with the account? Of course, accountability is important, and it is being emphasized again and again. Do you think the people will be satisfied with the drive towards accountability alone?
People are supporting this drive because there is an ample reason for that, because people think that the rulers in the past were responsible for actually misusing their power, amassing the wealth at the expense of the common people.
You don't think people will get impatient and want to
They
get
will. They will, but I think the efforts they are seeing
Right.
and witnessing made by this government to fix the economic problems, they are satisfied with them. But obviously,
they're satisfied?
yes, but I think the government needs to take some concrete measures
So that it is seen
actually
to be done.
to bring the inflation down. And some of the inflation that people are experiencing at the lower echelon of our society is
Certainly, what you say seems to be true, because we've seen the kind of price hike that we've seen in the budget.
So I
and
think the Prime
there
Minister
hasn't been any
recently,
movement or-
I think the Prime Minister recently issued a directive to the provincial governments that they should set up the price monitoring committees at the district and tehsil level, and that is the most effective mechanism. Because these price monitoring committees can force those profiteers and those elements who are using this opportunity to make their fortunes, to build their fortunes. So therefore, there's a need to tighten the check on the price hike at that level.
Right.
Some of the people are actually artificially raising the prices to make money and to use this situation to their own advantage. That needs to be taken care of. But at the same time, I think the government needs to take swift actions,
Right.
which are visible. Otherwise, people will become impatient. They may not be able to wait for a very long period of time.
Right, right. Safiullah, in your opinion, do you think the kind of, let's move on and talk about production orders. You know, we've recently seen that the Prime Minister, there's been, you know, some news about the fact that he's concerned about the convention that governs, you know, the rule of the convention of production orders, where the Speaker or the chairman in the Senate can call people who are in jail. We've seen that happen in the case of Shehbaz Sharif Saab, in the case of the former President Asif Ali Zardari Saab, and others.
Saad Rafiq.
Saad Rafiq.
Yeah.
He seems to be concerned about that. What's your opinion on that? Do you think that it's a convention? It certainly is a convention. Do you think it can be done away with? Do you think it would be a good move to, at this point, you know,
that's
go
a very interesting question. So as far as conventions are concerned, they're governed by the legal agreement within them, and that's how they go forward. By the way, this is a convention, but it also has its statements in the rules of business. Okay. There's a manual where the production orders are mentioned. So obviously, a government can do away with them. But the problem here is that the government themselves have been using it. In the case of Aleem Khan, when he was arrested, the government itself in the Punjab Assembly used a production order to bring Aleem Khan, and for a very similar offence, corruption, you know, it was, similar issues. So you would have this major problem that if you allow a law for Aleem Khan, but you don't allow it for, say, Zardari, or if you don't allow it for, say, Saad Rafiq, then the government is going to fall under serious pressure. And this is already a big problem because they did not use the production orders for Ali Wazir and for Mohsin Dawar. Right. These were two sitting MNAs. The first MNAs, in fact, of the Waziristan region. Right. And since the government did not use them, they have, in fact, in a way, in my personal opinion, bolstered one of the biggest movements that are going around in the KPK region. And so if the government continues to do so, this is if you look at the convention of the production order, this was, as a matter of fact, something that was introduced as a stopgap measure against dictatorships. Now, it is, in my opinion, a democratic thing to do. It is something that would prevent a prime minister from taking over the government. For instance, Bhutto became a civilian martial law administrator. He tried putting an end to convention production orders. Right. The move was heavily resisted. So if
and of course it affects across the board all the political parties.
It affects everyone. It affects PTI itself as well. But then we have to sort of delve deeper into what the production orders themselves are. And the production orders are a discretionary order. They are not something that are mandatory on the speaker. It is the speaker's discretion. The speaker has to give reasons as to why he's summoning a person, and he has to state what the importance of that person is. So if for instance,
but
in
for
this
instance,
particular case,
if the speaker of one political party, you know, chooses to only call people from his own political party, then of course that gives rise to that whole impression.
Absolutely.
And there's already all of that talk about the opposition saying that the accountability seems to be targeting only the opposition parties and not, the government and the people, the corrupt elements within the government.
So I suppose that the chairman NAB, in his statement yesterday, delved upon that in great detail. And I think it makes a lot of sense. And what he said was perfectly reasonable. So the statement is very simple, that there have been parties which have been in power for the last 30, 35 years. And there is a party that has come into power now in the last 8 months. Where do, if accountability starts, and if we start looking at who did corruption and when did they do corruption, do you not start with where it started? Rather, do you go straight to where it is right now? So, of course, in any civilized and in any legal society, you target the root of the issue. The corruption has been going on for a very long time, and if it's being targeted, all of these are old cases. None of these are new cases. Nobody's targeting corruption that has, for instance, taken place in the last 5 years. You mentioned a while ago one of the biggest examples of corruption, which I'm sure is going to become a case study for Pakistan, which was flooding dollars into Pakistan, $12 billion to be exact. This is the highest amount that has ever been flooded in the market to keep the dollar artificially low. Who benefited out of it, why this was done, on whose authority this was done. This is also something that, by the way, our finance rules do not allow. So if the State Bank was involved, if the FBR was involved in this, there will be cases, there will be issues, but there will come a time when these things are investigated and references are filed. An investigation normally takes anything from 1 to 2 years before a reference is filed. So obviously they cannot file references against PTI people right now because that minimal time has not passed.
But what about a lot of the people, I'm going to go to Jadoon Saab. Jadoon Saab, it's not a secret that a lot of people in the PTI have been part of other political parties. So it's not, just because the government has been there for, a couple of months, then, they can't really try them or they can't really investigate them. Isn't that true?
Maruk, political dynamics will not change overnight. We know how Pakistani politics works, and we do understand that even for all the good intentions, if you need to stay in power, you have to make certain alliances. And one thing which was correct in the past can't be incorrect today. Political parties, they're not standing at the high moral ground. The two main political parties, whatever they state day in and day out, they never practiced while they were in power. They want PTI to sort of behave the way in a textbook manner.
Right.
I think it would be asking too much. PTI is also a Pakistani political party, a nascent political party.
But corrupt elements in any
Yeah,
political
I'm coming to
party
that. I'm
should be investigated.
coming to that, Maruk. Only in power for the last 1 year. So I think it is very natural that you start the accountability process from those who were in power in the last 30 years. They are
Which
in
is
power
what Chairman
only for
Nab
the
said.
yes. It definitely should start from those who remained in power in the last 3 decades. Now coming to
Even if the people
now
who
coming to your question.
Even if, okay, just to clarify, even if the people who remained in power are part of another
Absolutely,
political party.
absolutely, absolutely,
Yes.
without any discrimination. And now coming to your point that the many leading lights of PTI, they have been in different political parties. So I think nothing new is being done. You see many leading lights who were part of Musharraf government, they were part of the PMLN government.
Yes.
And many who were part of the PPP government became, I think it's a very interesting
same sort
situation
of
in
political
Pakistan. So
people,
today
political
when
leaders.
the opposition politicians come and they appear in the talk shows and different television channels,
Right.
I mean, they try and portray themselves as the champions of democracy. But I think nobody can claim that. It's a very, very murky situation, very
Even
muddy
as far as
situation in
Rana Sanaullah is
Pakistan.
concerned, of course, he's very much a part of PMLN at this time, and he has been law minister under PMLN and all of that. But, if you look at his history, as a politician, he's not always been a part of PMLN. So, just as an example, I'm only stating, if you pick out other politicians, important politicians, everyone has a past, so to speak.
Right.
One very important politician who was part of the Musharraf regime, and even is a very famous, as the story goes, he presented him his own pistol as well, and used to call him a brother.
Right.
And then how people shift loyalties and become part of a different political setup which they despised all the time. I think people can't claim that they stand at a high moral ground.
But we need a
And-
system.
But I think, but Maruk, we need to give them some time. 1 year is probably not a time enough to judge any political party's performance. I think Javed Sadiq was very right that people will become impatient when they see that now there's no hope as far as the government is concerned. But today, whatever mess the outgoing regimes left for the PTI, I think it's not easy to clean it up in 1 year or 2 years. I think we need to be patient. We must understand that whatever corrective measures the government is taking will only pay with the passage of the time. It might take, in certain policies, Maruk, we do understand, we are all educated people. We can't
They take
sort of
time,
expect
yes.
miracles in 1 or 2 years. Even it might take more than 5 years time period, because there is such a huge mess in Pakistan, a political mess, economic mess, the foreign debts mess. I think for any political party to
Of
govern
course, it's a
Pakistan,
huge task for that the
Maruk,
PTI
for any
has
political party, for
undertaken.
any political alliance to govern Pakistan is a hugely difficult task.
Sadiq sir, do you agree? Do you think that it can
I
take
think
another 5
the
years?
PTI particularly came into power by making a commitment to the people of Pakistan that they will start a process of accountability against those unscrupulous elements, dishonest people who were responsible for ruining the economy of Pakistan.
Right,
And for this reason, people voted them into power.
right.
And the Prime Minister is very clear. I mean, I have heard him talking about the accountability that has been started by the PTI. He says that he will not spare the black sheep even in his own ranks.
Right.
And one of these examples is Aleem Khan's case, Babar Awan's case, because Babar Awan, was being appointed or being given a public office, and once a reference was filed against him by NAB, he was asked to resign.
Ji.
And then the Aleem Khan case, obviously he had to resign as a senior minister in the Punjab government. And I think if the PTI finds other people,
The PMLN seems to like to quote Aleema Khan's case again
Aleema
and
Khan
again.
case, and there are many others. You can point out so many other faces who are here in this government, in PTI, just to seek a refuge in the government ranks. So I think the PTI chief, the Prime Minister, is very clear in his perception of a balanced, fair accountability. If somebody comes to the government side and if he has done corruption, he has been involved in massive corruption, then he should not be spared.
Right.
And the NAB should be allowed to file a reference if they have enough evidence to file a reference against him or her. So therefore, I think the PTI has to show to the people, demonstrate to them
That they are
it is
across the
different,
board
that
against corruption.
exactly, and they want an across-the-board process of
Accountability.
accountability, and they are different from their past governments.
Right. But do you think that if the government does try to, do away, if they can at all, do away with the production orders, it would be a good move?
I think it would be, but production orders have
But
been...
it will have an across-the-board effect, which is what Barrister Saab was
Exactly, but I think the production orders, there's a new debate going on and has been generated recently,
Right.
that production orders of which member? A member who is seriously involved in a corruption case and in a criminal case. I mean, he has committed a crime,
Right.
and he has been
But
held...
the crime has yet to be proven in a lot of
Exactly,
cases.
but at the same time, you have to be very careful about it, because in the past the production orders were issued by speakers in the past who were the people against the members or for the members who were arrested by police on political grounds.
Right.
When the political rivals were being picked up by the police and then they were not being produced in the National Assembly, the speaker had to produce issue a production order. But if somebody is there in jail, for instance, for drug pushing or drug peddling, or another person who is behind the bars because he has committed a murder.
But Satish,
See-
it's a very murky sort of,
Yeah,
ground.
but this generates...
Because if you're not going to, I'm going to go to Barrister Safiullah with this. Safiullah, of course, innocent until proven guilty. And, even if you are in jail for murder, for example, or you're in jail for, like Siddiq Saab is saying, just political reasons or whatever, of course the two things are entirely different. But unless something is proven against you, shouldn't there be that presumption that perhaps you're innocent? And if there is that presumption, then by that same rule, the production orders should be allowed
I
for
absolutely
everybody.
agree with you, Manav. That's precisely what the case is, that you are innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
The law favors the accused.
Right.
And so one cannot hold the law against him. One cannot say that you have been charged with, say, terrorism, or you have been charged with the heinous offences of even genocide, rape, drug peddling, whatever it may be.
Right.
The fact remains, at the end of the day, that this is a democratic society. And in our nascent, in our very infant democratic society, we need to try and facilitate democracy in a manner that nobody else can just come forward and take the whole government hostage.
And to
which
take
has
your
been done.
argument,
Yes.
and to take your argument further, we don't know what happened, what the situation is as far as Rana Sanaullah's charges are concerned. We have no way of knowing whether he is involved or he's not involved. But interestingly, after he was arrested, I'm sure you all have also seen the spate of articles that came up,
Yeah.
and there was a lot of discussion on whether the charge is actually the government will be able to prove this charge or not, whether it's the evidence is strong enough or not. And in a lot of cases where the past was discussed, there have been people who've been convicted, have been in jail for 10-15 years, and then people have realized, well, they weren't guilty.
Absolutely.
So
It's very easy for notorious, and if the agencies are actually being malicious, it's been a standard procedure for them to plant something in them. Drugs have been a common thing. In fact, it's something that we have been, as lawyers, experiencing all our lives, that police would, for instance, of course not heroin, but a small quantity of marijuana they'd plant, try and get a bribe out of a person. This is something that's been happening within the country. However, Rana Sanaula's case is a little different, because there has been a lot of credible information. There was an arrest 3 months ago. That arrest led to testimonies. In those testimonies, there were statements that Rana Sanaullah is directly connected, and because this drug money was going directly into terror financing, there's a whole FETF aspect into it. So there is a lot of rumors. I'm not certain if this is correct, but through the grapevine, there's a rumor that in fact Rana Sanaullah was arrested on a tip-off from an international agency, not a local person. It was apparently because there was standard financing going on. There was this issue of an international agency which looked into where this money is going.
Rana Sanaullah is one example. I mean, I'm saying that hypothetically there can be people,
of course,
and there has been
regardless,
in the past.
regardless. I mean, without going into the merits of Rana Sanaullah's case, you're absolutely correct. No matter how heinous the charge, the fact remains that if a person has been elected as a member of the parliament, then the speaker has that discretion. Now, the debate here is not what the charge is, but rather the speaker's ability to summon those people, and the speaker must justify why he feels that person is necessary.
Right,
so for instance, in this previous case, let's just go back to what has happened recently. The speaker decided to summon Asif Ali Zardari, and Asif Ali Zardari understandably could have been important because the budget was to be passed and he's a very, very senior member.
Yes.
He also summoned Saad Rafiq, which is something that we do not understand, because Saad Rafiq is not as important in passing of the budget as, for instance, Asif Ali Zardari would be. But he refused to summon the two other, Mohsen Dawar and Ali Wazir.
Right. But it's discretionary, isn't it?
It's discretionary, and so obviously what we need to be thinking about
Maybe
now is
perhaps rules can be laid down.
Absolutely, try and lay down a procedure as to what the production order's discretion should be.
Right. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I'm just going to take quick comments from Jadoon Saab, and then I'll have to close.
I think, Maruf, we need to revisit this particular issue of production orders.
Right.
I find it very hard to find any parallels in any developed democracy in the world where convicts were accused or brought to the house and then they try and take the refuge and stay there because sessions go on for months. I think that's very unfair because other people are rotting in jails, and then politicians, they claim that they have a right and prerogative to be given this production order, and they sit in the parliament and they stay in the comfort, air-conditioned accommodations, etc. But do we have any parallels in other democracies like
but in many
the European
cases,
democracies?
I think the speaker issues the production orders under the pressure of the opposition benches, not using his discretion in a judicious manner.
Right. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. Thank you so much for joining us today, Javed Siddique Saab. Thank you for being with us. Barrister Safiullah Qauri, thank you for joining us today. Javed Jadoon Saab, thank you for taking out the time. As far as the political situation is concerned, as far as the opposition is concerned, whether there is a strong opposition to the government, whether they can muster up the kind of opposition that they need to show of strength to the government or not, will depend perhaps more on the performance of the government, on the state of the economy at this time, rather than any movement by the opposition itself. I think that the people of Pakistan want to see a robust economy. They want to see a country that has good economic conditions for its people, and I think that is should be of prime concern and is of prime concern to the government, regardless of how united or disunited the opposition seems to be. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.